Welcome to the program, Kyra Elise Gardner.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. I got to see Life with Chucky back at the Toronto After Dark Film Festival. Really enjoyed it there.
Awesome. I love that festival.
Yeah, it's a great fest. So of course this came out of you originally doing the short Dollhouse, and it's your exploration on the Chucky universe, going in to see your father's other family, and so to speak,
Mhm.
and Life with Chucky was a further exploration on a much larger scale. And in the short, you're front and center. But in Life with Chucky, you wait until the final third of the film to reveal your connection to the subject. What was the decision behind the framing so differently for this feature?
It I started my edit with putting myself at the front again, like the dollhouse, but when I made the decision to do a retrospect as well within the documentary and go through the films chronologically, because that made the most sense. It felt very odd in the cutting room floor because I introduced myself of having a connection to the films, but then like my dad didn't come on till Seed of Chucky. So then it was like a whole 45 minutes to where I was kind of brought back in, and it felt very out of place, like we had forgotten this thing anyhow. And then it was the opportunity to bring myself in with Seed of Chucky, but I felt like it took away from my dad's entry into the franchise as well. Like I wanted him coming in to be about his experience and and things like that. So I thought a lot of I feel like a lot of documentaries kind of can lull in their third acts anyhow, and it kind of just goes this way where I was like, well, if it's an act break, maybe it'll keep people interested, but also so yeah, that was kind of the thinking there in terms of that. It was weird. I wish I would have had like more time to play around and edit it, but I had already spent so long on it as because I just edited this myself over COVID. um, but yeah, it's and also I wasn't going in realizing that I was kind of like a one woman show in a sense, and having I was doing all the marketing myself until I had a lovely like publicist and things like that. It was just all myself doing the work. So I didn't realize that in trying to promote it, of course, you know who's making the documentary, because I was trying to like build hype for it. And so I was like, this is less of a twist and just kind of like in retrospect, but it at least is breaking a wall, which is fun. But yeah, it just felt like it was too long in between from where I was coming in the beginning. And then it kind of took away this thing with my dad by breaking the fourth wall there. And I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted my dad to have a section where it was truly about his work.
Right, and as you said, going out there and promoting it and showing this film, that you've kind of become the face of the film, anyways, as a director usually is when going out to
Yeah.
festivals. So
Yeah, lesson learned in my first feature is like also I wanted to recreate the Child's Play 2 poster, and so like literally my half my face is on the poster anyhow. So
there you go. There you go. Now, when putting the film together, like obviously you realized, going in with the familial connection that, of course, family would play a part in it. But did you realize how much of a celebration of family this film would become?
no, I had no idea because I went in with all my questions and knowing I wanted to like focus it on the family aspect and not just ask retrospective questions the entire time. But you never know the answers you're going to get. I was just like, please, dear Lord, people have similar answers to each other, and they all did. It was everything that my dad had described the Chucky family to be. They were, and in the editing room floor, it gave me a lot to work with.
Yeah, and it's kind of like it being a franchise because, of course, they talk about how in films, every time you're making a film, that on a good set, everybody does become like a family, and then they never get to see each other again after that. But because of this being a franchise element, you really got to explore the fact that they've gotten to be, they've gotten to have family reunions in a sense on such a regular basis. It's a very cool aspect of the film.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
very.
yeah, it is weird because you don't even think about that, and yeah, it kind of pops up like that. How it's been everybody the same way along. Now, you did some interesting story framing for the film. Of course, you did the making of the doll throughout the film, but then you also used VHS tapes and DVDs to separate the chapters of the films. What made you decide on these two elements to frame your movie?
Uh, well, first of all, the documentary mode that I have is obviously talking heads. There's like no way I had no money to make this movie. So there's no way I was going to go back and try and recreate footage of being on the set of Child's Play 1 and 2 or things like that. Go to Chicago and film all this stuff over there. There was no way that was going to happen. That would be a dream. But so I knew I needed like visual breathers for everybody to just like take a second and process what they just heard and get excited for whatever else was to come. And the moment that I decided to make it chronological in the first half of a retrospect, it just made sense. I was actually watching the Ted Bundy tapes on Netflix at the time, and their intro like title sequence is really beautifully cut together. I think it was like nominated for an Emmy. It was so good, and they had a lot of these shots of a tape recorder, and I realized that I needed something to visually show how long this has gone on. So I thought about VHSs going to to DVDs and then to Blu-rays was a way to do that and a way to visually break it up. And then as far as the doll being built, it honestly was inspired by fans coming into my DMs all the time asking if my dad could make them a Chucky doll. Because the answer is always no. This doll is very expensive. I love that you love this doll so much, but no, it's very expensive just to make his costume. And so that's kind of where that idea came about, was it just like there's so much that goes into making the doll before he even gets to set, before even the animatronics come in. And so I had, obviously, because my dad's shop is the one that coordinates all of that, I had the opportunity to like go in and film the woman Annie Edwards in Utah, who line by line puts together a Chucky sweater on a loom. That's great. Nobody's doing that these days. Like, I really just wanted to showcase how many people go into just making the doll for like fans to have a bigger understanding and also appreciation of what goes into it.
No, totally. Yeah, because it's a lot of work put into it. But the thing you said earlier about how you wouldn't be able to recreate scenes on a shoestring budget, but now I'm picturing in my head, what if you did like a hand puppet sort of thing in between the thing? I think that would have been great. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Creation.
It's director's cut. I'll add that in there.
There you go. There you go. Now, you don't only talk to those involved in the Chucky franchise in this film. There's also other names in horror, film, and television that you talk to. How did you go about deciding who you were going to talk to, who you reached out to for kind of like the more horror and television framing of the story?
Yeah, that was a suggestion by a producer friend of mine, was to get some outside perspective of people still in the genre to some capacity, to kind of break it up as well, which I thought was interesting. And then obviously I still didn't have a budget, so I couldn't pay anybody. So it was like whoever was there, whoever was in front of that camera was nice enough to set aside like 2 hours of their day. Or Marlon Wayans, I literally only had 15 minutes with, because that man is so busy.
Oh yeah.
So that was insane. But it was who I had access to. Like Abigail Breslin and I became friends on Zombieland 2. I was visiting on set with my dad when I was in college, and we became friends. Lynn Shay is a good friend with my dad, and I knew her. And obviously I love Insidious, and she's in Nightmare on Elm Street. So it made so much sense to get Lynn. And then Dan Povenmire and I actually connected through TikTok. And coincidentally, he like met my parents in college, and they were already friends. I had no idea.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it was really cool. So it was just kind of finding like who had a bit of a connection. Like Abby's also a Chucky fan. She collects baby doll heads. She was a kid actor. She's in Scream Queens. And then Marlon Wayne's like you have to know enough about horror in order to spoof it. And Dan Povenmire's a voice actor. I really wanted another voice actor to kind of come in and comment on that, who was also a parent, was important, so that they could speak to that. So that was kind of like the decision making of what I had access to.
Wow. Well, you bring up the Marlon Wayans only having 15 minutes because he's so busy. And it's kind of funny that in the movie, he ends up talking about how he's so busy. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's not lying. I went to his house and it was like 15 minutes he had in between doing like a life cast for a movie that he was doing or TV show, and then like having to go because he was on like a comedy tour at the time.
Oh my God, that's crazy. Well, he's great in the film, so that was definitely a great get for you. Now, there's a lot of talk about how horror fans are very welcoming and nonviolent, really connected to the genre in the movie, and it's kind of like underline said there that horror fans kind of have like they get like a level of comfort from horror films, that it's like that's their comfort food. What is it about horror that you think evokes that feeling in them?
Um, I think horror is the genre where you get to see whatever impulsive thoughts you have that are definitely illegal and not moral in the real world come to fruition. And or like if you were slighted or there was an injustice, you do think like, what if I could just not, no, I don't think this,
Yeah, yeah.
but you do have those thoughts. We're human. And so you get to see it played out on a screen in an actual story. And a lot of the times, though, horror films are centered around so many relatable things. Like a lot of horror films, especially back in the day, are talking about like LGBTQ themes and vampires and things like that. Everything is symbolic of stuff that is very set in the real world. So it's almost like escapism, but like dark escapism because people are dying or whatever. But a lot of the times you get to see like the underdog, so to speak, come up out on top of this like crazy scenario, and you like root for it. It's also, I feel like people just enjoy being scared too. There's like obviously a thrill in that, where I don't think you're going to get scared much in your daily life.
Right, right, right. And yeah, and earlier with like when you at the start of that, it kind of also sounds like there's a bit of a catharsis in watching this sort of stuff because it's fantasy, but you can still release that kind of tension.
Exactly, it's like almost like working out but like for your brain.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. Now, in the film, it's mentioned by your mother how you were frightened as a child by Chucky, that the bad people are here, and you ran to your room. What point in your life did you stop fearing Chucky and, embrace Chucky, so to speak?
I think around like 7 or 8, it was like, okay, because he would always be out during Halloween, like as a Halloween decoration, him and
Right.
Tiffany. And but I watched Seed when I was around 8, and that set me back a bit because I didn't know my dad was in that movie. So I legitimately thought my dad died that day.
Ooh.
Because I was so confused.
Was he not
Um,
home that day? Was that like you watched it with him not being there? Is that?
I snuck it to a friend's birthday party.
Oh, okay.
So I was that kid who had to call my parents to pick me up and go home.
Oh,
So
geez.
that day, because I was so convinced that he had died. But so after that, and it was more of like my dad setting me aside and being like, everything's fake, like this and that. And so after that, it was like, okay, this is just a part of my life, that this doll's just here. I get it.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a really fun life for you and your family, definitely. And I really look forward to more people getting to see this film. Really enjoyed it, and like as I mentioned, it is a celebration of family. Like it's talking about a murderous doll, but it really is a celebration of family in the end. And I commend you for finding that story out of this. It's fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking with us. I look forward to what other films you got coming on the pipe. If you got more documentaries coming, can't wait to see them.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Have yourself a great day.